I went on a fishing trip to the West Coast with my son and his wife. They said, "Go walk around Tofino for a bit, Dad. You'll love it." When I came back to the marina, the boat was gone. My wallet was gone. My phone was gone. They left me on Vancouver Island with nothing but the jacket on my back. But what they didn't count on was this. An old carpenter always knows how to build something from nothing. And when I found my way back, I brought the whole storm with me. They saw me in the evening news. If this story moves you, stay with me until the end. I'm sitting in a plastic chair at the RCMP detachment in Tofino, British Columbia. The room smells like old coffee and wet boots. Outside the window, I can hear the rain coming off the Pacific. It hasn't stopped since yesterday. I'm wearing the same flannel shirt I put on 2 mornings ago, back when I still thought my son loved me. It's damp at the collar. There's a smear of mud on my left sleeve from where I stumbled on the boardwalk trying to flag down a stranger. Across from me, a young constable is typing something on her computer. She's maybe 26. She has the kind of careful expression that people get when they're trying not to show pity. I can see it anyway. I've been reading faces for 68 years. My name is Gordon. No, wait. Wrong story, wrong name. I am Walter. No. Let me start again. My name is Hugh Mercer. No. The names are taken. My name is Alden Burrows. I am 67 years old. I was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario in February of 1957 in a farmhouse that my grandfather built with his own hands. I spent 41 years as a Finnish carpenter. Crown molding, custom cabinetry, hardwood floors. I worked on some of the finest homes in the Muskokas. I built a business from a second-hand table saw and a pickup truck. At my peak, I had 11 men working for me. Good men, tradesmen who knew the difference between doing something fast and doing it right. And now, I don't even have a piece of ID that says who I am. The constable looks up. She tries to smile. "Mr. Burrows, we've contacted the Coast Guard and filed a report with Transport Canada regarding the vessel. But without documents, this is going to take some time." I nod. I can't really speak yet. My throat has been doing that thing it does when I'm holding back something too big to swallow. 3 days ago, my grandson Eli pressed his face against my arm on the ferry deck and said, "Grandpa, I don't want you to go ashore." I laughed. I thought he was being dramatic the way 11-year-olds get. "It's just Tofino," I told him. "I'll buy you something from one of those cedar carving shops." He shook his head and stared at his sneakers. "Don't go." That's all he said. Don't go. He knew. My 11-year-old grandson knew what his parents had planned, and there was nothing he could do about it. The rain picks up outside. I count the ceiling tiles to keep myself from falling apart in front of this young constable who is doing her best but cannot understand what it means to be 67 years old and erased by the people you spend your life building things for. I should tell you about my daughter-in-law first. Her name is Ingrid. She married my son, Curtis, 12 years ago in a ceremony at a vineyard in the Okanagan that cost more than my first truck. She has a way of speaking that is always very correct, very deliberate, like she's thinking 3 sentences ahead of what she's actually saying. I never disliked her. I want to be honest about that. But I always felt that when she looked at me, she was doing a kind of quiet calculation. Curtis is my eldest. He's 41. He works in commercial real estate in Calgary. Land assemblies, development deals, the kind of work where you're always looking at what something's worth rather than what it is. He was a good boy when he was young. Stubborn, competitive, needed to win at everything. But there was warmth in him. I used to take him to the shop on Saturdays, and he'd hand me chisels, and we'd listen to hockey on the radio. I don't know exactly when that boy disappeared. I just know that somewhere between his MBA and his second car, something changed. My younger son, Noel, that name is taken. My younger son's name is Tatum. 29 hours of labor to bring Tatum into this world, his mother used to say, and still worth every minute. She always said that. Even at the end. Even when Tatum was calling me 3 times a week, asking when the estate would be settled. My wife's name was June Burrows. She died 18 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Same as it takes too many people too fast. She was 63. She was the kind of woman who grew tomatoes on the back deck of a condo and still made them taste better than anything you'd find at a farmer's market. She was funnier than me, smarter than me, and she knew our sons in ways I couldn't see because I was always too busy being proud of them. In the last weeks, she held my hand and said, "Alden, promise me you'll keep the house. Promise me you won't let them rush anything." She didn't explain. I didn't ask her to. I just promised. After the funeral, the questions started almost immediately. "Dad, when are you meeting with the estate lawyer?" "Dad, we should talk about the RRSP situation." "Dad, the house in Muskoka. Have you thought about what you want to do with it?" The Muskoka property was the one June and I had built together. Not metaphorically. Literally. I framed it myself in the summer of 1994 with 3 guys from my crew. It sat on a peninsula of Canadian shield rock overlooking a lake that turned orange every evening in October. June had picked out every window, every fixture. She planted a wild garden on the south shore that the loons nested near in spring. Curtis wanted to sell it. He had a developer contact, he said. "The market is strong right now, Dad. We'd get good money. Split it 3 ways and everyone moves on." I told him what June told me. We wait. That was when the phone calls got shorter. 6 months ago, I found out by accident. I'd gone to Curtis and Ingrid's place in Calgary for Eli's birthday. They'd moved from the interior the year before, chasing a bigger market. I went to use the washroom, and on my way back I stopped in the hallway because I could hear them in the kitchen, voices low and careful. "Curtis was saying the HELOC is coming due in December, Ingrid. That's $380,000. If the property doesn't move before spring, we lose the margin on the Douglasdale deal, and that's everything we've built." And Ingrid said, "What if something happened with the estate timeline? If something changed?" Curtis said, "What does that mean?" And Ingrid said it slowly and quietly, the way you say something you've been practicing. "What if your father wasn't the one managing it anymore?" There was a silence. Then Curtis said her name like a warning. "Ingrid." She didn't say anything else, but it wasn't the silence of someone who'd been corrected. It was the silence of someone who was patient. I stood in that hallway for a long time. Then I walked back to the living room and watched Eli open his birthday presents and told myself I'd misunderstood, that it was stress talking, that people say things in moments of pressure that they don't mean. I was wrong. And I think somewhere beneath the part of me that wanted to believe in my children, I knew I was wrong. The trip was Curtis's idea. "A week on the West Coast," he said. "You've never been to Tofino, Dad. It'll be good for you. Fresh air. We'll charter a boat for a few days, do some halibut fishing. Family trip. Just us." Tatum drove up from Vancouver. His girlfriend came too. A woman named Petra. That name is also taken. A woman named Rosa. Quiet. Didn't make much eye contact with me. Eli was there. He sat beside me at every dinner, asked me to tell him about the old Muskoka summers, about the time I accidentally nailed my boot to a subfloor. He laughed at the right places. He has his grandmother's laugh. The second morning on the charter boat, anchored off the coast in clear Pacific water, Curtis came to me with an envelope. "Dad, I need you to hold on to these." He pulled out what looked like legal documents. "Estate administration paperwork," he said. "The lawyer sent them, and I don't want them getting wet in my bag. Can you put them in yours?" I said, "Sure." I put them in my waterproof pack with my passport, my wallet, my phone. He squeezed my shoulder. "Thanks, Dad. I knew I could count on you." What I didn't see was what happened between Curtis and Ingrid after he left the cabin. I learned this later. He gave her a nod, and she took out her own phone and made a short call. "That's done," she said. "Okay." And then she put the phone away and went back to looking at the water. That night, Eli knocked on the door of my cabin. He was supposed to be asleep. He stood there in his pajamas with his hair sticking up. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something. I let him in. He sat on the berth and picked at a thread on his sleeve and said, I heard Mom and Dad talking about Tofino, about the town dock. He said they were going to tell you to go see something on shore, and they were going to leave without you. I looked at him. I thought about how 11-year-olds sometimes get things wrong. I thought about misheard conversations, about context. I told him it was probably just grown-up talk he didn't understand. I gave him a glass of water. I walked him back to his cabin. On the way back, Ingrid opened the door. She looked at Eli and her expression was flat. Come in. He went past her. She looked at me and said, sorry for the disruption, and shut the door. I lay awake until 3 in the morning. The next day, the captain anchored near the town dock at Tofino. We were having breakfast when Ingrid said, Alden, you should go walk around the village a bit. There's a wonderful First Nations art gallery near the main street. You love that kind of thing. Curtis nodded. Yeah, Dad. Go stretch your legs. We'll stay on board, get Eli settled for his nap. We'll be here when you get back. Tatum said nothing. He was looking at his coffee cup. Ingrid said, leave your pack here. No point carrying all that weight in the rain. She said it so practically, so reasonably. The rain had just started. My pack was heavy. She was right that the strap was bothering my shoulder. I left it on the bunk. I took $20 cash from my wallet. I remember exactly a 10 and 2 5s. And my reading glasses, and I walked down the gangway. I know what you're thinking. I know. Believe me. I have asked myself the same question every hour since then, but when it's your son, when it's the boy you taught to hammer a nail straight, you don't think in terms of schemes. You think in terms of coffee and wet pavement and whether the gallery opens at 9 or 10. I found the gallery. It was beautiful. Cedar panels, argillite carvings, prints from Haida artists. I spent maybe 40 minutes inside. I bought a small print, a raven, folded in brown paper. Then I walked back toward the dock. The boat was not there. I stood at the end of the dock for a long moment. The rain was heavier now. I thought, wrong dock. I walked to the next one, then the next. Then I stood on the main dock and looked out at the water, and I saw maybe 400 meters out, a white charter boat moving southwest. I could read the name on the hull. Pacific Cairn. That was ours. I will not tell you that I ran. I am 67, with a right knee that has had 2 surgeries, but I walked as fast as I have ever walked, and I shouted and I waved, and the boat kept moving. On the rear deck, I saw a small figure. Dark hair, pajamas still, standing at the railing. Eli. He raised one hand toward me. I raised mine back. Then an adult arm reached out and pulled him inside, and the sliding door closed, and the Pacific Cairn moved into open water and disappeared. A woman near me on the dock said, "Are you all right?" She was maybe 70 herself. Red rain jacket, short white hair, the kind of face that has spent a lot of time outdoors. I said, "That was my son's boat." She looked at the water. She looked back at me. She said, "Do you need help?" Her name was Margaret Solis. She was from Victoria, down for a birding weekend. She had her car in the lot and a fully charged phone and no intention of leaving me alone on that dock. She walked me to the RCMP detachment herself and sat beside me in the waiting room for 2 hours until the constable on duty had taken my statement. That was yesterday. Now it's this morning, and the rain is still going, and I have no documents, no phone, no money, no way to prove I am who I say I am. The constable has confirmed that the Pacific Cairn departed Canadian waters in the direction of Washington State. Transport Canada has been notified. The Coast Guard is aware. Margaret comes back in with 2 cups of coffee from the Tim Hortons down the road. She puts one in front of me without asking. I don't thank her yet because I still can't speak without my voice doing something I don't want it to do in public. She takes out her phone. She says, "I want to post something. I have a Facebook group, mostly birders and naturalists, about 1,200 people." She pauses. Someone might know something or someone. And people should know what happened here. I look at my hands. The knuckles are carpenter's knuckles, thick and a little crooked from years of work. I'd built houses with these hands. I built a deck once in November in snow because the family needed it done before Christmas. I put a new kitchen into a women's shelter in Sudbury and didn't charge them $1. I have never in my life needed someone to speak for me, but I am 67 years old, and I am sitting in a police detachment in the rain with $20 in my pocket, and my son's boat is somewhere in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and Eli is on it, and I don't even know if he's okay. Do whatever you think is right, I tell her. My voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. Margaret starts typing. The constable comes back. She tells me the lawyer who handled June's estate has been reached. He is coming in tomorrow morning by floatplane from Vancouver. His name is Aubrey Sinclair. He's been June's family lawyer for 30 years. Good man, she said a week before she died. Straightforward. He won't let anyone push you around. I think about June saying that. About how specific it was. Straightforward. Won't let anyone push you around. Like she was describing someone she'd already chosen for a particular job. I asked the constable if I can use the station phone. She says yes. I try to call my old business partner, Lauren McKay, in Huntsville. He picks up on the second ring because Lauren has always picked up on the second ring for 40 years, rain or shine or deer season. Alden. His voice doesn't change. He just says my name like he already knew something was wrong, the way old friends sometimes do. Tell me. I tell him. All of it. He listens without interrupting. When I finish, he says, What do you need? Just to hear a voice I trust, I say. You've got it, he says. And Alden. You know what June would say right now. I know. Get up. Don't give them the satisfaction. She was smarter than both of us, Lauren says. By the next morning, Margaret's post has been shared 900 times. She shows me on her phone, sitting at the Tim's again with more coffee and a breakfast sandwich she insisted on buying. The comments are coming from all over BC, from Alberta, from Ontario, people who've had similar things happen. People who are furious on my behalf. People asking for names. People calling their own MPs. A local journalist from a Tofino weekly calls the detachment. Then CBC Radio, Vancouver. Then a freelance reporter from the Globe and Mail who happened to be in Euclid doing a piece on coastal erosion and pivots completely when she hears the story. By noon, I am sitting in front of the camera. I am not a man who speaks easily in public. I am a carpenter. I express myself in joinery and sight lines, and the particular satisfaction of a corner that meets at a perfect 90. But I sit down and I tell the truth, and I say it plainly because that is the only thing June ever asked me to do. Tell the truth plainly. Don't dress it up. The CBC piece airs that evening at 6. On the Pacific Cairn, somewhere near the San Juan Islands, Curtis sees the notification on his phone. Ingrid is reading on the stern deck. She looks up when she hears him say her name in a voice she hasn't heard before. She reads the article. She looks at the numbers. 31,000 shares. How did anyone find out? She says. Curtis doesn't answer. He goes inside and sits at the galley table and puts his face in his hands. Tatum comes in from the forward cabin. He has a glass of water. He puts it down on a table without drinking it. I told you, he says. His voice is very quiet. He doesn't say anything else. In his bunk, Eli takes out the old flip phone that his grandmother gave him 2 years ago before she died. She'd said, Eli, this is just between us, for emergencies. He'd asked what counted as an emergency. She'd smiled and said, You'll know. He dials the only number stored in it. Constable Priya. That name is taken. The constable on duty answers on the first ring. A child's voice says, My grandfather is the man on the news. He didn't get left behind by accident. I heard my parents planning it. And my grandmother's phone has a video on it. From before she died. He pauses. I think you need to see it. The constable says, Where are you right now, son? He says, On a boat. But I'm okay. Can you help my grandpa? 3 days later, I land at Vancouver International. Margaret is with me. Aubrey Sinclair is there with a folder of documents and an expression that tells me something significant has happened. Transport Canada and the RCMP Marine Division have intercepted the Pacific Cairn at the Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal. My sons are with their lawyers. Ingrid is not speaking. There are people outside the terminal holding signs. I don't expect that. Handwritten signs on poster board. One says, "We're with you, Mr. Burrows." Another says, "Elders deserve dignity." An older man, maybe my age, steps forward and grabs my arm. He doesn't say anything. He just grips my arm for a second and nods. I understand. Some things don't need words. Aubrey takes me aside before we go any further. He says, "Alden, there are some things I need to tell you about June's estate, and about a video she recorded 12 days before she died." He opens his laptop. The video is 6 minutes long. It's June, sitting in the chair by the window in the Muskoka house. She's thin, the way the illness made her, but her eyes are entirely hers. She's looking straight at the camera. She says, "Alden, if Aubrey is showing you this, it means our sons did something I was afraid they were going to do. I want you to know I'm not angry. Not at them. They came from us, and we must have done something wrong somewhere, and I have made my peace with that. But I am not going to let them take what you built. I changed the beneficiary structure of the estate 6 weeks ago. The Muskoka property is yours entirely. The TFSA and the investments are yours. If something happens to you before those assets are settled, everything goes to the Eli Burrows Education Trust and to the Huntsville Habitat chapter. Not to them. I love them, but I love you more. Take care of Eli. He's the best of all of us." She pauses. She almost smiles. "And Alden, don't you dare sell that house. I have tomatoes coming up in the spring." The recording ends. I am sitting in an airport boardroom, and Aubrey and Margaret are both politely looking at the table while I take a minute. Eli is brought in with a family services worker. He runs at me with the particular graceless speed of a child who has been holding something in for a long time. He hits my chest with his forehead, and I hold him there and don't let go. He smells like kid shampoo and boat diesel, and he is shaking. "Grandpa, I'm sorry I called. I called the police from the boat. I told them everything." "I know," I say. "I know you did. I heard Dad and Ingrid planning it 2 weeks before we left. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if you believe me." "I believe you," I say. "I should have believed you on the ferry." He pulls back and looks at me. He has June's eyes exactly, the shade of them, that particular pale gray-green that I used to look for in rooms full of people. He says, "What's going to happen to Dad?" "I don't know yet," I tell him. "That's up to the law now. And will you be okay?" I think about Muskoka, about October light on Canadian Shield, about tomatoes in spring. "Yeah," I say, "I will be." The RCMP laid charges 3 weeks later: fraud, elder financial abuse under the Criminal Code of Canada, and mischief. The fraud charge related to the estate documents. Aubrey determined that the papers Curtis had asked me to carry on the boat were forgeries, designed to look like legitimate estate administration paperwork in case I'd looked at them before going ashore. They'd intended for me to be found without documents, without proof of who I was, in a jurisdiction where my identity could be quietly contested. Ingrid had spoken to a private lawyer about power of attorney options the same week she married Curtis. 12 years ago, some of this was planned for a very long time. Tatum cooperated with investigators. He said he'd known something was being planned, but hadn't fully understood what. He'd thought it was just about pressuring me to sell the property. He had no idea about the forged documents. Whether that's entirely true, I don't know. But he came to Aubrey's office 3 weeks after Vancouver, and he sat across from me and said, "Dad, I am a coward and I am ashamed." His voice cracked. I'd been ashamed of myself for a long time about a lot of things. I'm going to try to do better. That's all I can offer you right now. I looked at my younger son, at the circles under his eyes and the way he was holding his hands, and I thought of June saying he was worth every one of those 29 hours. I said, "Call me on Sundays. We can start there." He nodded. He's called every Sunday since. Curtis didn't come to see me. He sent a letter through his lawyer. It was 3 paragraphs of legal language that amounted to, "I'm sorry you feel this way. Ingrid filed for divorce a month after the charges were laid. She moved back to her parents' place in Edmonton and gave an interview to a lifestyle podcast about financial stress in marriages without mentioning any of this directly. It was something. The civil trial was 7 months after Tofino. Curtis and Ingrid were ordered to pay $85,000 in damages and court costs. The Muskoka property, as June had arranged, remained entirely mine. Curtis lost 2 major development deals when his partners found out about the charges. He's still working, but in a much smaller way. He sold the Calgary house. I don't know where he's living now, and I'm not sure he'd tell me. Eli lives with me now. He spent the first month at his other grandparents'. Then he called me and said, "Grandpa, can I come to Muskoka?" I said, "Your room's ready." He said, "How?" I said, "I've been putting it together since January." He laughed. It sounded like June. His school is 20 minutes down the highway. He's joined the robotics club. He wants to learn carpentry next summer. I told him we'll start with a birdhouse and work up from there. He said, "Grandma said you'd say that. Margaret Solis comes up from Victoria twice a year. She brings good wine and terrible weather forecasts, and she knows more about Pacific loons than anyone I've ever met. We sit on the dock in the evenings, and she tells me which birds are passing through, and I tell her which boards need replacing, and it's the most comfortable silence I've had since June." Lorne came over last fall to help me put a new roof on the boathouse. He's 69 and shouldn't be climbing, but you try telling Lauren McKay that. We worked for 3 days and talked the whole time, and it was like no time had passed at all except that it had. And we both knew it. There's a raven print on the wall of my living room now, brown paper, unframed, tacked to the pine beside the window that looks south over the water. I bought it in Tofino the morning my sons left me there. I think about that morning sometimes, about how I walked into that gallery with $20 and came out with something beautiful and had no idea yet what the day was going to do to me. I think about Eli on the boat railing with his hand raised. I think about Margaret in her red rain jacket saying, "Do you need help?" I think about June in that chair in front of the camera, thin and tired and absolutely certain. I have tomatoes coming up in the spring. She was right. They came up. We have 8 plants this year. Eli and I. He doesn't know anything about gardening, and neither did I. Not really. That was always her thing. We're learning. Every evening in October, when the light goes that particular orange over the shield, and the lake turns copper and the loons are calling somewhere in the reeds, I sit on the dock and I think about what it means to still be here. To have a house I built. To have a grandson who chose me. To have a friend who drove across an island in the rain for a stranger. The sea gives back what is yours. So does the land. Sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it costs you things you can't replace, but it gives it back. My name is Alden Burrows. I am 67 years old. I came from nothing and built something, and my children tried to take it back from me, and they couldn't, because I learned something from 41 years of carpentry that they never understood. You can't tear down what's built on a solid foundation. You just can't. And if this story touched something in you, if you've ever been left behind by the people who were supposed to stay, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me what you would have done, because sometimes knowing someone out there is listening is the only thing that keeps the rain from getting in. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since Tofino, not in any grand philosophical way. I'm a carpenter, not a philosopher, but in the practical way that a tradesman thinks about load-bearing walls. Every structure holds because of decisions made early. Every collapse can be traced back to something that was skipped, cut short, done wrong when no one was watching. Curtis didn't become the man who left me on that dock overnight. That took years. It took every time I let a hard conversation slide because I didn't want to ruin a holiday dinner. It took every time I covered a debt without asking why it happened. It took every time I told myself that ambition and coldness were the same thing, that my son was just driven, just focused, that the warmth would come back when the pressure eased. I was wrong about that. Warmth doesn't come back on its own. It has to be tended, the same way you tend a fire or a garden or a marriage. If you stop tending it, it goes out. That's not cruelty. That's just how things work. What I didn't expect, what I still find hard to explain, is how much integrity compounds the same way that negligence does. Margaret didn't know me. She had no reason to stay on that dock in the rain with a stranger who couldn't stop his hands from shaking. She stayed because that's who she is, built that way over decades of small decisions to show up, to help, to not look away. Her character didn't appear out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon in Tofino. She earned it quietly over a lifetime. And it saved mine. Eli is the one I think about most. 11 years old, on a boat with adults who had made a decision he knew was wrong, and he found a way to act anyway. He used an old flip phone his grandmother had given him. He called a stranger. He told the truth at cost to himself, knowing his parents would find out. That is not a small thing. That is enormous. Most adults I know couldn't do what that boy did. He didn't do it because someone told him to. He did it because June had spent 11 years showing him, quietly and without speeches, what a person with a spine looks like. That's the thing about integrity. You can't install it in a hurry. You can't give a child a lecture about doing the right thing and expect it to take. You have to live it in front of them, every ordinary day, when it costs you nothing, and when it costs you something. June lived it. She lived it all the way to the end, with that camera and that recorded message and her tomatoes coming up in the spring. She was teaching Eli right up until she couldn't anymore, and it held. I rebuilt the boathouse roof last fall with Lorne. My hands still know what to do. My knees complained the whole time, and I didn't care. There's a particular satisfaction in doing physical work that I don't think I'll ever be able to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. The way a thing becomes solid and real under your hands, the way you can stand back and see exactly what you've made. That satisfaction is available to anyone. It doesn't require money or status or the right family. It requires showing up, doing the work honestly, and not cutting corners when no one's watching. I lost a son in Tofino. I'm still grieving that. I don't think that grief has a clean ending, but I didn't lose myself. And that, I've come to understand, is the only thing that was ever entirely mine to keep.